Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Bartels. I'm the Chief Development Officer of Becker, LLC. We'd like to say good afternoon to our friends on the East Coast and good morning to our friends on the West Coast. I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsor, Jason Ortner from Aviante, and I'd like to have Jason introduce our speakers.
Hey, hello, everybody. Thanks again, Mike, for the introduction. Yes, my name is Jason Ortner. I'm the Sales Regional Vice President at Aviante. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be here sponsoring today's webinar. I'm really excited about the topic. We're going to be talking about a better way to M&A, strategies for sourcing, courting, and winning deals. I'd like to introduce our moderator today and our panelists. Starting with our moderator, he's a staffing practice leader and the partner at Becker, LLC, and that's Marty Borosko. On the panel today, we have three fine gentlemen. The partner at Transact Capital Partners, that's Patrick Morin. We have the Chief Strategy Officer at Vaco Talent and Solutions, and Brian Waller. And our CEO at Labor Source Holdings, Brad Chesin. Quick piece on Aviante here before we get started. Aviante is a leader in the staffing software space for more than 15 years. We provide staffing firms with an all-in-one solution. To really think of us as your source or our solution for onboarding, ATS, CRM, and paid bill needs for staffing firms across the nation. Looking forward, if you're looking forward to a competitive way to compete in today's market, I'd love to share more information at your convenience, so let me know if there's anything I can help you guys with. And with that, again, I'm truly honored to be a part of the webinar. And Marty, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Jason, and we really appreciate Aviante's support for this series. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, panelists, and welcome to our audience. Many of you attending are aware that Becker runs an ongoing buy-side staffing industry M&A series. It culminates in an actual two-day live event, and this webinar is a part of that series. Brian, Patrick, and Brad, what a pleasure it is to have the three of you. Really appreciate that you've agreed to come on, and knowing the three of you, I'm looking forward to a pretty spirited conversation here today. I apologize that we're not where we're supposed to be, which is on Kiwa Island having this discussion, but there is a little bit of a bright side because I know Brad pretty well, and I know he'd be rushing like heck to get out to a tea time, so maybe we're going to have a little bit more of Brad's attention since we're not where we're supposed to be. But what a difference a year makes. I mean, if you flash back to today, and from today 1 year, and you look at the M&A space, especially in the staffing industry, we've really had a tremendous turnaround. This time last year, there was very little activity. As far as Becker was concerned, most of our deals were cratering or being put on hold. And now you have flash forward 1 year, and we've got a pretty vibrant marketplace. And it's really, I think, a really nice setting for today's conversation. Today's conversation, as Jason indicated, is going to be focused on sourcing deals, courting sellers, and winning deals. And we're lucky enough to have the three of you share kind of your opinions on that. I'd like to maybe set some background here, maybe about some of your experience, especially Brad and Brian, and then Patrick, maybe about the marketplace, and then we'll get into our questions. But Brian, why don't we start with you? I really think it'd be good for our audience members. Many people, of course, know Vaco, and many people know that Vaco is quite acquisitive. But I think it'd be really helpful for our audience for you to maybe give a little bit of the highlights of Vaco's acquisition over the last almost 5 or 10 years, and if you could also talk a little bit about its strategy and its goals that it set along the way.
Sure, Martin. Thanks. Good to be with everybody today. So Vaco, we launched Vaco in 2002. So we're reaching our 20-year anniversary of the business. We specialize primarily in the talent solution space around accounting and technology. So we're niche focused in those areas. We have some specialty businesses that kind of feed into that as well. But that's our primary business, and we operate across the U.S. in about 45 markets in Canada and India. We actually we're an organic growth story for the better part of the first 12 years of our history. And in 2014, we partnered with our first private equity firm. And that really set us on a path to combine our organic growth with acquisition growth as well. We're now on our second private equity partner in 2017. We traded our investors out. Both have been great runs for us, but over the course of the last 7 years, we've done 15 acquisitions, and really all just businesses that are accretive to the core of what we do every day. And so we try to expand geographically through those acquisitions, or just deepen our strength in the areas in which we focus. And really, just for some context around the size deals that we've done, typically the businesses are anywhere from, call it $5 million to $25 million businesses, founder-led businesses that are still instrumentally involved in their business day to day. And what we try to do is find businesses where the founders are starting to think about retirement, but they want to partner with us and grow the business with us over some period of time on the back end of a transaction. And we ask them to roll equity into those deals as well. And so the overwhelming majority of those acquisitions have gone exceptionally well. We've had some challenges with a few, and it's a strategy that we're going to continue into the future as we look to continue to grow the business. So really, at this point, probably 60% of our expansion is in the acquisition space versus organic. And we actually just closed on our most recent deal last week, a business called Alluvion out of Jacksonville, and they're going to be our Vaco flag in the Jacksonville marketplace. They also have some presence in Tampa and South Florida as well, but it's going to be a nice new geography for us to expand what we do.
That's great, Brian. Thank you. I think that's very helpful. And Brad, you've been around the merry-go-round a couple times, a little bit different than Brian, who has been changing PE partners. You built some companies, and then you and your partners have sold them, and then you've started over again. Maybe you could tell a little bit about your story and pick one of those trips around the merry-go-round and talk about what maybe your strategy was.
Sure. Yeah, certainly my experience is definitely different than Brian's. I have been in the staffing industry for about 38 years now, so I'm really considered more of an operator than anything. And so I cut my teeth on in the acquisition world really with a company that I built a franchise program for, and we ended up going out and buying quite a few of our franchisees back. Helping some of our franchisees sell their businesses, that type of thing. Not quite the traditional acquisition market that you would think, obviously, but it was where I first got started in it. And then, I ended up moving on to another organization where I helped them structure their company to sell the organization. And then moved from there onto another organization that went into sell mode. So I kind of got tired of being on that side of the desk and decided maybe I wanted to be on the other side where I'm actually buying some of these myself instead of selling for everyone else. And I partnered up with a investment banker out of New York. And we went on a run looking at quite a few deals all across the country. We looked at a lot of deals. In the process, I was introduced to a lot of private equity groups too. Found one private equity group that we really liked a lot, and they had a deal in process that I partnered up with them on, and we went in and bought the organization. It was about a $35 million company at the time, primarily in the skilled trades staffing, and jumped in there in about 3 years, took it to a little over $100 million, and we were made an offer we could not refuse by a strategic buyer, and we sold the company, and then I went on another run looking to try to acquire another company, and worked with a lot of different companies out there. Also worked with a lot of private equity. I started getting a little bit of a reputation and developing relationships with the private equity world, and did a couple of consulting gigs on some turnarounds on a couple of bad acquisitions that might have been made by these private equity groups. And went in and did some turnaround work and helped structure the companies for sale. In that same process, found a company that I was looking at buying at the time, going down the road, pretty far down the road, met up with another private equity group that came in and said, hey, we'd like you to come in. We've got a company that we'd like you to come in and invest in. Bring your acquisition with you that you're working on, and let's do both of them and start to build again. So it takes me to where we are now. So Labor Source Holdings, we've got two companies. We run them side by side, and I'm overseeing both of them at this time. And one of them is One Source, which is a restoration, emergency response, catastrophic event type staffing business. That we've got 12 markets across the country based out of Kansas City. And the other company we just acquired in October, which is another skilled trade staffing company called Power Labor, based out of Austin, Texas. And we currently have 6 markets, and we'll have a 7th one opening up on Monday. So we're already starting to expand that one and running the 2 of them side by side. And so that's where we are here. Along the way, with some of this, with the skilled trade company that we had back in 2014, made 3 small acquisitions. They were more tuck-in type acquisitions that we added to the company. Made a couple here so far. So we're going to continue our strategy of the organic growth paired up with looking for some nice tuck-in acquisition opportunities that we can bring along.
Thank you, Brad. I think that sets the table pretty well. Patrick, I'd like to bring you in at this point, and let's actually talk about the marketplace a little bit. And obviously the first question is always valuations, right? Yeah. Maybe you could talk about how valuations stand today compared to pre-COVID.
Well, it was I like to think of it like one of those science fiction movies in which people are put into stasis. And you know how they leave Earth, they put them into stasis, and then all of a sudden they wake up at Mars, and they're the same people that just a little bit more active. And that's almost exactly what's happened in terms of the marketplace. The entire staffing M&A kind of infrastructure went into this stasis for a little while during COVID, and then came out and came roaring back. Especially if you take a look at the first quarter, and this is just M&A in general, you had over $1 trillion worth of transactions, just like pumping them out right there. And so the valuations themselves, what was curious is that you would have expected a pretty precipitous drop, because most expectations are going to be based on future expectations of future income. And what in fact happened was the deal process actually stopped, but the valuations themselves and the multiples themselves have really been able to maintain. They dipped down just a hair, and now they kind of stepped up just a little bit. They're flat to a little bit higher, and at least that's what we're seeing on from ours, and some still really strong valuations within the market, especially given the number of buyers that are in the market, both strategics and private equity, and even individuals who are coming in and looking for companies. Because there is, what I would consider to be a relative dearth of companies available in the market, those valuations are really holding.
Thanks, Patrick. Brian, let's talk to you. I guess the question is, are there sellers in the market? If they are, who are they, and what's the quality of the sellers in the market today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are certainly, and finding great companies to buy is certainly challenging, and it's very competitive in the marketplace that we're in today. And what we're seeing, we really try to stay niche focused in the professional staffing space and in the accounting and IT space, and it's as hard as it is to find candidates and consultants to fill our jobs, it's equally as difficult to find good acquisitions to make that fit in with our footprint. We're seeing deals, quite a few deals through investment bankers that are competitive processes that are running that are coming across our desk. And I will say that the deal flow through that avenue has increased dramatically since we've been private equity backed. The private equity firms obviously have great relationships with investment bankers. Investment bankers feel like if a private equity firm is behind the company that's making the purchase, that the deal has a much higher chance of closing. And so we do see a lot of deal flow in a competitive process. through our private equity firm. In addition to that, we have our own internal team led by Jeff Haithcote, and his full-time job is to look for organic and acquisition growth opportunities. And what we found, at least for Vaco, our best opportunities come from relationships that we build organically on our own. We've done acquisitions with companies that we've built relationships with over a 2 or 3 year period of time, waiting for the founders to be in a position where it makes sense for them to sell their business. So the types of, to your question about the types of founders and the types of businesses that are selling, what we see is we see founders that have built a really solid business, call it over 15, 20 years, that are starting to think about their ultimate exit. And a lot of them have a second layer of leadership that they'd really like to pass the baton to. And they really are having some structural problems doing that, and also getting the cash off the table for their equity. And so in a lot of times what we're doing with those founders is we're acquiring those businesses and working with them to put really solid transitional plans for them to their second layer of leadership, and allowing them to exit the business in by selling a majority of their equity in their business to us on the front end, and then participating in a downstream private equity deal when we trade out hands. As I'm sure most people on the call know, once you get in that private equity cycle, there's usually a, call it 3 to 7 year hold period, and so it provides nice exit opportunities along the way. And those founders that jump on board with us and roll their equity into their business also get some of the multiple arbitrage that we see by being a larger company than what we the multiple that we paid for them on the front end.
Thanks, Brian. Brad, maybe you can pick up along the same lines. Talk about who you're seeing as sellers in the market. I'd be curious as to, in your discussion, your opinion on this. I found pre-COVID that it was such a hot market for so long that maybe sellers had become a little unrealistic in their approach to going to market. So I'm curious, as you talk about the sellers in the market today, whether you think they're realistic in their expectations. And then last thing, maybe talk about how you go about sourcing deals.
Sure, certainly. So first comment, and not to be flippant about it, but I think everybody's a seller, especially right now. It's a lot like the housing market, and Patrick mentioned a minute ago, and to his point is, the valuations are really high right now, and they're actually overvalued. So just like in the housing market, you got a lot of people who never thought about selling their house or moving, but they can get top dollar for their houses right now and quick. And so more and more people are selling their homes. Same is happening with their businesses right now. Everybody's seeing valuations are up. They're high. Everybody's a candidate for selling, even those who had not considered it prior to. So I think everybody is somewhat of a seller right now. I do think that there's a lot of them that are out there that are unrealistic. I've got quite a few of them that I'm working with right now that really they have their business way too overvalued. We've had those discussions. But like Brian, I feel very much, and I approach it very much in that let's develop this relationship. Now is probably not the right time for us to buy you. We're not going to pay that kind of price for it. But let's keep the relationship going. Let me put you on the bench for a while. Go build your business. Get it to the point where you think that valuation matches where your business is right now. And let's come back and revisit that later down the road. And when that happens, then yeah, that might be the right price. So I've got 4 or 5 companies right now.
Also, Brad, when it doesn't happen, you're at least coming back saying, "Look, I'm still here waiting to take you to the prom."
That's correct. You're absolutely right. So so in the process, you develop pretty nice relationships with these folks. You get to know them really well. You get to know their businesses even better because you stay in constant communication with them. So it's just kind of where we are in today's market. Every now and then you find somebody who's realistic. Those are the ones that we're moving on. But the others, we sort of push them back a little bit, tell them to hold off. We know they're not going to get it from anybody else either. So, it's a nice position to be in. As far as how I source deals, yes, I do use some of the investment bankers and brokers. One of the best ones is right here on this call, and Patrick I can't say enough about you, man. You source stuff to me on a regular basis, and it's always a joy working with you.
Thank you, Brian.
I do use them, but the primary way that I source deals, like I said, I've been in the business for a long time. I go to all the conferences that take place when there are conferences taking place. Obviously, go to all the conferences. I work the floor pretty heavily and get to meet and know all the other staffing companies. And I network with them on who they know, what they know, as well as all of our vendors, the people that we work with on a regular basis. Aviante, who's on this call, some of our insurance brokers, our attorneys, Marty. I work with folks who know other people in the market that know these companies, that might know who's looking or out, testing the waters a little bit, and get a lot of referrals that way, and tend to work my network before I do anything. But I always appreciate the brokers feeding, and to Brian's point as well, being part of a private equity group, we do see a lot of leads coming across, running a professional process. So we take a look at all of those as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we source, but for me, I like developing the relationships. I like getting to know the people, and I feel like it maybe even gives us a little edge up on some of the others that might be looking at the same company.
Hey, Patrick, Brad and Brian both seem to source deals occasionally through intermediaries, but mostly by creating their own opportunities. Maybe as an intermediary, you could talk a little bit about effectively using folks like you as part of the sourcing plan, and how folks can do that.
Sure. And you can whether or not the intermediary is going to be on the buy side or on the sell side. Buy side meaning, hey, you've actually paid them to go ahead and hunt, and make sure that they're bringing it into you, and they're bringing in each into those individualized deals. Those are pretty good relationships, but a lot of times I find them to be harder to yield something. Simply because they're going out there, and as you're using the buy side guys, they're actually digging through the sand trying to find a clam, so to speak. So let's just put this on an overarching basis of both buy side and sell side investment bankers, and getting deals from them regardless. First rule is going to be having clarity. You have to have whenever you're talking to an intermediary like me, an investment banker, have clarity on that for which you are looking in terms of size, geography, skill sets. Be very clear on situations that are amenable to you. A lot of times we get telephone calls and they're just like, well, we're just looking for staffing companies. Really? Because there's 17,000 of them out there, and we can bifurcate this and trifurcate this any way that you want to. So, and it could be based on size or skills or geography or other things like that. So having an absolute clarity before you get on the telephone or before you reach out to an intermediary is crystal clear, and making sure that you actually have board approval, making sure that you have already kind of checked the boxes within your own organization in terms of the spending limits and structures and things like that, because the clarity that you have on that makes it easier to talk to a guy like me. The other part of it is, and Brad and Brian both talked about this. This is a relationship business. And the depth, you have to not only stay in front, but you really are building a relationship with us over a period of time, because we end up getting probably 100, 150 private equity phone calls per week into my office alone, and they're all searching for different things. And over time, you start to recognize people and what they're looking for and the kinds of deals that they did, and you start following them back and forth. So the relationship is extremely important, and it's not about calling every week going, hey, what do you got new? Hey, what do you got new? It's it's a very multimodal approach, from emails to calls to personal visits, things like that works out really well. One of the best things that you can do is that if an IB brings you a deal, make a decision quickly. Make a decision very quickly, whether it's in the bailiwick or not in the bailiwick. So I turned a deal last night. I sent it out to a private equity group. They came back this morning and they said, we're not going to buy this deal, and it's for these 4 reasons. And they enumerated the reasons. And it was terrific because it was a change in their strategy. But because I have that information, I will absolutely show them other deals in the future because I didn't have to wait 2 weeks. They came right back with us. And then one of the ways that you can also build a relationship with IVs and using some of that sources, if you come across a deal and you are not going to buy that deal. So for example, Brian was talking about his guy whose job is to do nothing but source deals. If you come across a deal that's unrepresented and you want to build a relationship with an investment bank and you are not going to buy that deal for yourself because it's a wrong fit for one of the reasons we talked about it, refer them over to an investment bank and say, hey, you guys, if you were represented, this could go along really well. I will tell you, the investment bank will fall over themselves in subsequent deals to be able to make sure that you're seeing everything. It's just again, it's a relationship builder. It's one of the strongest ways you can do it.
Thanks, Patrick. I want to seize on something you said, and you're talking about, in using an intermediary, be focused and understand and articulate what your criteria is. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about choosing targets, right? How are you choosing your targets that fit your acquisition strategy? A lot of folks use the word analytics, right? It's a fancy word. To me, it's criteria, right? Analytics and criteria, it's the same thing. But talk to me. I've seen clients who have a very, very simple analytic structure, right? They have 3, 4 things they're looking at, and then that's their deal. I have clients who have a very, very complex spreadsheet of factors that they're looking at in choosing a target. Talk to me a little about those different approaches, pros and cons, from what you've seen of putting a lot of detail in your analytics and sizing up targets.
Man, this is like right from my meeting yesterday. Like you weren't in on it, Marty, but I got to tell you, that question just goes right from the meeting yesterday. There are some buyers, as you're right, that they have this checklist 25 long before they'll even issue an NDA, and they want to know everything. What I would actually tell you is that I think a lot of times the perfect is the enemy of the good, and people miss out on deals because they're searching for some deal that checks every single box out there. But I find that the people who are some of the best acquirers and who have the most opportunities, what I call the most at bats, are the ones that use 3 or 4 metrics and understand how those metrics go into the accretive nature of that deal to their deal. So a lot of times they're going to be looking at revenue growth over a period of time. They're going to be looking at the bill rate, pay rate, and the margins between those two, and looking at the operating margin, saying, okay, what does that look like? They also start looking, as they're dropping it down to EBITDA, we start looking at points of saying, are there synergies within that I can carve out, and I can actually pay more for this company because I can carve those things out. And moving quickly. There's a couple of things to win deals from my perspective that we brief our clients on as well, which is it's not just about the valuation of the company. Brad was talking about that earlier, is that we got these heightened expectations, but there's other things that go along with that. One is surety of close. Is this deal actually going to close? Number 2 is going to be speed to close. Because if you're working on a deal and it's going to take 6 months or a year or whatever else it is, you're going to start getting deal fatigue and lose people. And then cultural fit. So it really is all of those elements. What's the value? Speed to close, surety of close, and cultural fit. And that, if you look at things relative to those metrics as an offer, that's going to be good. But keep your criteria simple.
Brian, I think this is an important question, so I want to get your opinion. You've got the giant spreadsheet, you got the short spreadsheet of metrics that Vaco looks at, and maybe click off a couple of what you think are the really key metrics. And then if there's a surprising one you use, I'd love to hear about, a metric that you maybe think is a little surprising.
Sure. So we really, because we have our private equity partner, we leave a lot of the financial analysis up to them. So when we're really talking about financial metrics, we push a lot of that, where our CFO works with our private equity firm to drive a lot of those decisions. When you're talking about financial metrics for us, gross margin percentage is a key one for us. We want to make sure that the company that we're acquiring is pricing their business correctly, and it fits in with the story that we're already telling through our existing business. That's certainly key. We look at client concentration to determine that we're not exposed through a high client concentration with one or two clients, or maybe specific projects that ultimately have an end date that are going to go away, that has their revenue heightened. But really, when we're looking
Brian,
at
even
deals,
an industry, customer concentration in an industry itself or in a geography, I would assume too.
a lot of times we're acquiring businesses that are to expand into geography, like the Jacksonville deal that we just did. So a lot of the business that we're in is focused exclusively in one geography. So, but certainly it goes into the equation, and industry certainly does, Patrick. You know, I think when we're initially looking at deals, we go off the spreadsheet and we really focus on a few things. One is we focus on we're a fairly large business at this point, and we do very specialized things. And if you start doing too many things, it's hard to call yourself a specialist. And so we stay pretty tight to businesses that are accretive to what we're already doing, businesses that mirror what we're doing in the places that we're doing it today. We also look at cultural fit is huge for us. You said it well. This is a people business. We don't really look at it like we're buying a revenue stream or a list of clients as much as we're buying a team that's going to take us into the future. And so that's key for us, and can become challenging through the process because we want to meet a lot of the team before we do a deal. And then lastly, for us, and I mentioned this before, but we're looking at to acquire businesses that are led by founders that are not ready to sell the business and exit, but are ready to partner with us to ensure a smooth integration, and if needed, a baton pass to the next layer of leadership. Hopefully, and in a lot of acquisitions that we've done, we've bought businesses where the founders had wanted to work ongoing indefinitely with us, and are still on board with us today, and we plan to keep them as part of our leadership team well into the future. Thanks,
Brad. Brad, how about you? Anything different in terms of metrics or analytics that you're looking at, or pretty similar to what Brian and Patrick have talked about?
Well, everybody's touching on the same points. I think that my list, by the way, just to go back to your original question, is a very short list. I don't have a big spreadsheet list. And I probably take a look at the things I'm looking for in a company in a little bit different order than what's been talked about so far. So for me, I tend to focus more on the soft values. So if I were going to rank them in the top three things that I'm looking at right off the bat, number one is culture. It's got to be a good fit. If it doesn't fit and it doesn't match what we do or any of that, I'm not interested in it. It's got to be a good cultural fit. That's one of the hardest things to change about an organization. I can change their pricing structure. I can change their, I can get their margins raised over time. I can do all of those kinds of things, but changing the culture can prove to be very, very challenging. Number two for me is the people, the talent that they bring along with it. They've got to have some strong talent. The last thing I need to do is to acquire a company and then have to turn around and hire all new people to go in and fix this company up. So I want the talent that they've got in there, and I want them to come on board and be a part of the organization. So I'm looking at their talent. And then third, that's when we'll probably start looking at the numbers a little bit closer. Frankly, they got to clear the first two hurdles before the numbers become an issue. Don't get me wrong. The numbers are important. They're very, very important, and it will kill a deal very quickly if the numbers are just really terrible. But I'm not even interested in looking at the details of the numbers until I determine whether or not this is even a company that fits us, that it's going to work within our organization. So
I want to add some anecdotal evidence to that too, because Brad mentioned earlier, we've showed him a lot of deals, and early on, his questions are always, tell me about the people, tell me about the situation, what's going on. And now that I think about it, Brad, that's exactly what you do. you're looking for the story and then you back into the numbers. So
Right.
it's a
Listen, if the numbers aren't as pretty as I want them to be, but their culture is fantastic and they got some great talent, and I want the company that bad, I can get the numbers fixed. I can fix that part, or at least I have. Maybe it's delusional on my part, but I have the confidence in myself to be able to get those numbers fixed and get them turned around. But I need the culture right. I need the people that are going to be in there as well. So that to me is the first two hurdles that have to be crossed before I even look at any other part of what's going on. So and that's a little bit of that, building that relationship up front. You get to know who they are, what they're all about, what they're doing, that kind of thing. And I'll use an example in the staffing industry. You know, I've got sales reps that are out there right now. We're in skilled trade staffing. I had a sales rep came to me the other day and he said, "Hey, I was in this hospital the other day and they need a whole bunch of nurses. And we can make a lot of money." They gave me an order for like 20 nurses. I said, "We don't do healthcare staffing. We don't do nurses. Well, that's not our area." He said, "Yeah, but it's money." I said, no, the answer is no. It's not what we do. I approach acquisitions the same way. Is this what we do? Do they fit what we do? If not, don't even go there. Sure, it might be a great acquisition, it might be a great deal. But if it isn't what we do, let's don't drift off just because it might be an opportunity. Let's stick and do what we do best. So
that's great, Brett. The discipline is so important. All right, so I'm going to challenge you guys now, because I can tell you I hear culture all the time. Like, I hear every single person involved in M&A on the buy side talk about, it's all about the culture. You don't know how many folks I see that they say the right things, right? I mean, look, we got guys like Patrick out there on the other side. You don't think he's scripting what the sellers say, and you don't think that he has them saying exactly what they need to say about.
You don't do that.
You gotta wait while I twist my mustache.
Patrick, surely you're not doing that. Come on.
So you know, what I sometimes don't see is buyers really trying to figure out what the culture is, really taking time or having a system to really figure out if it's a cultural match. Brian, I'll ask you, what's your process to really make sure that there's a cultural fit besides listening to Patrick at the, you know, management meeting the first time you guys sit down?
It's a good question. You know, it's a failed acquisition is not good for the buyer or the seller. And in our situations, when we're wanting to acquire leadership teams that are sticking around and rolling equity, that helps to mitigate the risk that there's less than full transparency on the front end. And so there's really no substitute for time and investment in relationships. Brad spoke about it earlier, but we've acquired businesses where we've had literally talked to the founders for 3 years before we closed on an acquisition. And for whatever reason, it wasn't the right time for them or us, but we invested that time into understanding the way in which they look at the business to ensure that it matches the way that we look at the business. And it, you know, it's, we feel like we've got a great culture. We certainly aren't perfect, and we just work from a perspective of extreme transparency. And we, you know, we let the founders into our business and let them experience a lot of our leadership team and a lot of our team members, so that they understand what they're stepping into. And in the same way, we ask them for the same level of transparency, and we invest time in meeting with and learning about the second layers of leadership and the producers they have on their team. One strategy that we've used as part of an acquisition process in multiple occasions is part of the diligence process. We had, prior to us being able to meet the extended team that we were acquiring, the founder was a little hesitant to let us spend much time with their team until we got further down the line. We actually put together a survey that the founders actually presented to their team, and it was under the guise that it was a survey that he wanted to talk to his team about culture and how they felt about the business, and they shared those results with us, which was, it's not something that every founder is willing to do, but it was very enlightening, I think, for him and for us. And it was one way to learn a little bit more about what we were acquiring.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I actually really appreciate that. I will say this though, it's during the management presentations, culture will out itself anyway. You'll see by who is involved in the process, and when you go through the management presentations, it starts to raise its head. You'll see it in intelligence. I will tell you is 2 deals that we closed last week, 2 tech deals that we closed last week. The cultural fit between the companies was astonishing. And the buyer absolutely sat down with the CEO and the executive team. And it was more than just, hey, how do you operate the business? It got right down into the sinews of their lives and what was going on with them. And the difference between that and a different deal that we're working on, where there seems to be, there's just this back and forth is going head to head. When you start looking at even the way in negotiations that people solve problems, and you say, is that culturally the way that we would solve this problem? There are signals that buyers can go through to identify what the culture of a company is going to be and it could be from an interview, but it's really just by interactions. There was an old adage about you can learn a lot about a person by spending 4 hours on the golf course with them. I actually believe that to be true when you're on extended Zoom meetings through due diligence and seeing the way that people treat people.
Brad, I want you to jump in here because I've had the privilege of being involved with you in some early discussions with targets. And I'm always amazed, when we hang up after a discussion with some of the principals, how quickly you pull out whether or not it's a cultural fit and some of the things that they said or did or how they responded to some of the questions, and you determined it wasn't or it wasn't a cultural fit. What are some tells for you? Like Patrick just gave some tells that it's not a cultural fit.
Well, and Patrick's right. You can pick up a lot in the management meetings. I'll give you an example. We had a deal we were working on about a month and a half ago. We had a management meeting, and it was a Zoom call. Obviously, not everybody's getting together right now, but it was a Zoom call for a management meeting. Had the owner there and all of his team sitting around the table, all on camera at the same time. And we were asking some questions, and I would ask certain questions. And only the owner spoke. Nobody else in the group said a word the entire time. The owner dominated the conversation. I immediately knew, all right, this is a very different culture right here. This management team, they may or may not be strong, but I have no idea. I didn't get anything out of the meeting. So, but I will say that the owner dominates everything that takes place, is probably making every single decision that's made in that organization. It all has to go through him, all of that kind of stuff. So it immediately told me this is probably not a good fit culturally for us. Plus, this particular owner wanted to roll money and wanted to stay on board and continue to work in the organization. I knew that wasn't going to fit either. So we ended up walking away from that deal as a result of it. It just was not a good fit. So from a cultural standpoint, and Brian hit on this, and I agree, it's about timing. Some folks are looking to close deals quickly. I'm not one of those. I'm not looking at having to be able to close a deal quickly. Once we get to the LOI and start the due diligence process, then I'd like for that to go quickly. But the courting portion of it doesn't have to go fast. I'd rather take our time and do it the right way and make sure that everybody's comfortable with it. Because from a cultural standpoint, I think that if somebody's rolling money into the deal and rolling equity over, they are looking at me just the same way I'm looking at them. They've got to feel comfortable that the culture they have is going to fit well within my culture here also. So it's not just a one-way street. So you have to develop that relationship and get to know them all pretty well. I have some deals like Brian. The deal I just closed in October, I've been working with that owner on that deal for about almost 5 years. I've got another deal that's sitting on the bench right now that we speak every single week. But I've been working with him on his deal probably 5 years. It'll come. It'll be here one day. The culture fits and it works, and you get along with the owners. And also, I think that's an important piece of it. And I may have straight off of your question, and I apologize, Marty. But yeah, I think that, looking at how their team interacts with the founder and the owner, that's a big piece of what I'm looking for in most cases, and how they operate their business.
That was right on point, Brad. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I mean, we could probably talk about the analytics and how to analyze them, for another half hour and not run dry of good material. But I'd like to shift a little bit to the buyers having to tell a story, right? I mean, part of this is, in determining whether it's a fit, in determining whether there's the right culture, and also in winning the deal is the ability for a buyer to tell an authentic story. It's not just a story to me, like a lot of buyers have stories, but it's not an authentic story. So to me, that's really a key to successful acquisitions, is telling an authentic story that sells. Brian, talk about that. Talk about what Vaco's authentic story is when they're talking to sellers.
Sure. So I think it's important, and it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about just extreme transparency through the process. One of the things that we do now that we have closed, it's actually 16 acquisitions with the one we did last week. I said 15 earlier. The overwhelming majority of those founders are still with us in leadership roles, and so that it's not a concept on paper anymore. We're not drawing up an acquisition plan that we're going to try to go execute. We've actually done it, and so the best thing for us to do, what we found, is to give the founders of the businesses that we're acquiring access to those founders that have already sold their business to us, and to talk about what went well, being very transparent about where the challenges were with integration. We have examples of the equity that they rolled being worth significantly more under the Vaco umbrella. We help them grow their revenue and their EBITDA, as well as the multiple that they see on a second bite of the apple. But as you do it more and more, it becomes easier to sell the story, because you have real situations that you can bring to light. And so that's really been our best approach at just kind of educating founders on what life will be like under the Vaco umbrella.
Man.
Brad, how about you? What's your authentic story that you tell to folks?
Yeah, it's a little different than Brian's. Unlike some of Brian's deals, I think that, a lot of theirs remain standalone or operate like they have in the past, and the owners stay on and do. I am not necessarily a big fan of that for the most part. It occasionally works, but I would say 95% of the time, founder staying on in the kind of acquisitions I'm looking at, which are typically tuck-ins, right? We're bringing them in and we're changing them over and absorbing them into the organization. The founder staying on doesn't necessarily work that well. And so for me, it goes along with what Ryan said, but it goes to the next level down to their senior management team. They need to be able to see how we operate and what we do and other deals that we've done and how those folks have fared, and the success that we've experienced with other acquisitions that we brought in as tuck-ins, and how those individuals have their careers have skyrocketed, their income has increased, whatever the case may be. So that's a little bit more of the integration piece of it. From the owner standpoint, we certainly want the founder or the owner to be around to help with transition. I think Patrick said it the other day, we always ask them to give us a 1-year consulting agreement. May only need them up to 3 months, but they'll probably actually be gone in about 30 days. So there's typically the way that ends up working. And, I'm really more interested in the team below them and what kind of opportunities we can provide them, and how we can show them that joining a larger company and joining forces, what new opportunities that'll provide to them, and get them excited about it. So,
Marty, I'd like to chime in here for a second, because I really appreciate both what Brad and Brian have talked about, and from the intermediary side of this, it's probably important to kind of address process, and so everybody who's listening can understand, is that if you're running a process to sell a company, you're getting a lot of interest, and then normally there's going to be two cuts. The first cut is going to be to the people that are going to actually meet the team, and then the second cut is going to be the company that gets the deal, right? So we're going to go from 12 to 15 people who are interested in buying a company down to 6. We'll invite those 5 or 6 companies in to meet management, ask questions. That's the MP. And then from there, we'll ask for firm and final offers and then bring them in. The story during that management presentation or even beforehand is absolutely one way to be able to differentiate yourself as a buyer. There's no question about it, because in everybody's mind, sellers' minds, they're thinking to themselves, I love my team, I love my staff for the most part. I love my team, I love my staff, and I want them to be happy after I'm gone. And so part of that story is that's being told to that individual is saying, yeah, your team's going to be great, the company's going to be in good hands. The second part is when they're talking to the people who are going to be remaining, is that this transaction will be a step up. It can't be like this gigantic leap up, because if it feels that way, then they kind of look at their current situation, and if the deal kind of blows up, this company has a tough time with it. But they want it to feel just like this transaction's going to go, and my life's going to get a little bit better. Maybe I'll get a little bit more money, or maybe I'll get a better environment, or maybe for some of them, I will be able to continue to operate the way that I'm in, the way that I do. So I really do put a lot more emphasis on the story that the buyers are telling as a way to differentiate themselves from other buyers in a competitive situation.
I want to follow up with you, Patrick, because you get to see Brad and Brian and folks like that tell their story, right?
Yeah.
I want to ask you this: what are some tells that folks like Brian and Brad aren't telling an authentic story, right? That when they leave the meeting, you counsel your seller and you say, yeah, I listened to that story, but let me give you these 3 tells that tell me that story is ringing a little hollow.
Yeah, a lot of times it's when they talk about past deals, and the past deals, either they're two things, they're either all glowing or they're all terrible. Right? If they're somewhere in the middle, it's that's believable. But it's also, hey, this was a great acquisition for us. We did hit a couple of bumps along the road, but that's a believable tale, or it's been the best thing ever. I'm looking at that going, The second thing is in execution, even when it comes down to like NDA or LOI or definitive agreement or any of those things, or delay in setting up the management meetings, that usually means that there is something going on internally within the company. There's some consternation that's going on, and probably the outward view is not matching the inward, the inward happenings. And so there's they're very subtle things that people do in those management presentations during their stories that you kind of scratch your head and you go, this doesn't feel right. And I will tell you, my spidey sense kind of starts ringing. And we have an obligation to tell our clients that.
We're running out of time, unfortunately. I'm going to get one more quick question into each of you. We've talked a lot about these soft sales points, right? Part of it comes down to economics and deal structure as well, and valuation. Brian, obviously, you pay the people the most, you may get the deal, but you talk a lot about the rollover equity that you provide for your sellers. Do you find that to be a distinguishing factor for you? I'm curious in winning deals.
Well, it can be a distinguishing factor in winning them or losing them, certainly. And so we're looking for, but we look at it that's okay for us. If we roll out what acquisition strategy is working for us, and if we can show a history of how it's been successful with other founders, and if that's not what makes sense for the founder that's trying to sell their business, then there's no perfect solution, and our solution isn't the right one for them. And so, again, going back to the transparency thing, we would rather I'm a sales guy at heart, so I like to close every deal, but I've had through the acquisition strategy that we put in place, I've had to come to the conclusion that you don't want to win every deal. And if through transparency and through the structure in which you put in place for the deal, if it doesn't make sense for them, there's probably a buyer out there that it does. And so it's really a table stakes kind of thing for us. We want founders to roll equity into the business, and it's worked for us, so we're going to replicate. But that's I think that there's no perfect way to do acquisitions, and Brad's actually obviously had a different approach than us, and he's done more tuck-ins. And you know, I think that buyers need to understand that every deal is not the perfect deal for them, in the same way that sellers need to pick the right partner, not solely based on price, but what the deal structure looks like and what the integration looks like on the other side of a deal close.
Yeah, I agree with that, by the way, and we like to tuck in the tuck-ins as well to roll in equity on top of all that. It you know, gives them buy-in, creates that transparency that we're looking for. So we like to do those kinds of deals instead of letting the seller, you know, take his money and go sit on a beach somewhere. We never hear from him again. So we do like that rollover equity in our program as well.
Patrick, why don't we end up, you've got to sell the sellers on the deal a lot. Obviously, you know, don't give the obvious answer that we want all cash, but you know, what economic, you know, structure makes the seller think they have the right value here and the right upside in the transaction?
Yeah, because I mean, you know, a few years ago, we were doing all cash deals, right? We were all swimming in it. And what COVID introduced was an amount of risk and recovery risk from COVID. And so you know, we briefed them pretty much that there's going to be a component of cash. A lot of times, if you've got a strategic, there'll be, or, you know, an individual, there's going to be some component of a seller note, seller financing that goes along with that. But if it's private equity, it's predominantly going to be cash and an earnout of some kind. And the perceived risk is going to determine what that is. I think one of the important things for buyers to realize is that what we're talking about is that if there is going to be a penalty for the company not performing on that earnout, there should also end up being a bonus on the flip side, where they're actually going to get paid more for the company if they stick around and help them out, and bring that up pretty early, because that kind of structure sells.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, gentlemen, this has been a pleasure. Really have enjoyed this conversation. I thank all of you for spending some time this afternoon, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Enjoyed it. Appreciate it.